At the time I joined the band, it consisted of 5 members who played together. This corporation, which was known as Eagles Limited, included each and every individual. Eagles Limited was owned by all of us. In addition, we shared equally in the. But after we got back together, Don and Glenn had the opinion that they need to have a significantly larger portion of the pie. Don Felder was terminated from his position with the Eagles through the use of a cold fax. The response to the question was no. I don't know who sent somebody a legal notice or anything else, but it just came down that there was no, and you are dismissed. I don't know who sent it. 20 years later, he finally made his voice heard. There will be no more concealment, and there will be no more upholding a positive image. Every single fight, every single control, every single injustice, and even every single treachery was brought to light by him, layer by layer, detail by detail. As a 77-year-old man, Felder is no longer in need of the Eagles, but it is imperative that he tell the truth. That being said, he is not omitting anything this time around. In the event that you believe you have a complete understanding of the Eagles, you should get ready for what is about to happen. Don Felder joined the Eagles in 1974 as a guitarist, and he revolutionized the band's style almost immediately after joining. Not only did he give the band a powerful rock sound, but he also widened the band's sound, which had been heavily inspired by country music on prior albums. The contributions that Felder made were not limited to technique alone. Eventually, it became the essence of the most well-known guitar solo in the band's history. It was my musical individuality, a separate character, and also the soul of the solo. One of the most important landmarks in history is the release of Hotel California in 1976. A straightforward demo that Felder played on a 12-string guitar at his home in Malibu was the starting point for the construction of the tune. It was a combination of technical virtuosity and unusual musical feeling that contributed to the lengthy and well-known solo. Felder was positioned at the heart of a power battle that he was unable to win, but it ended up being the thing that identified him to millions of admirers. In Quincy, Arizona, I am currently standing on a corner. What a concern it is. There was a covert power structure inside the Eagles, and Don Henley and Glenn Frey were in complete control of it. A concealed power structure existed behind the scenes. They made all of the decisions, including the direction of the songwriting, the set lists for the tour, and the means by which the cash was distributed. Despite the fact that he not only performed, but also contributed to the writing of the hits, Don Felder did not have an equal say in a band that was known for its harmony. The Eagles were more like a company than a band, because they were separated by personal ambitions and behaved more like a business. Felder was adamant about not being stilled. He started to inquire about things. Given that Henley and Frey were the ones who contributed the most to the overall effort, why were they given a larger portion of the revenue? What were the reasons behind the persistent rejection or strict control of the creative ideas of other members? The answers to these questions were not provided. On the contrary, they were considered to be dangerous. When Felder was trying to preserve fairness within the band, his attitude was regarded as being tough to work with. However, in truth, he was just trying to maintain justice. The disagreement was not addressed, but rather intensified, particularly after the Eagles got back together in the year 1994. In spite of the fact that Felder remained to perform with the band during the Hell Freezes Over time, he was disqualified from participating in the band's financial decisions. In 2001, he was terminated from his position as a result of these lonesome teardrops and memories of things. Rather than a meeting or an explanation, there was only a chilly written notification that was issued via fax. Felder's life had a sea change as a result of that experience. It not only meant that he would lose his job, but it also meant that he would lose the ability to claim a portion of the legacy that he had helped establish. His response was to take legal action, and he filed a complaint against Henley and Frey, accusing them of breaching the contract, removing him from the band without his consent, and distributing the proceeds in an unfair manner. An aspect of the Eagles that the audience had never seen before was brought to light by the lawsuit, which rapidly became a phenomenon in the media. Felder transitioned from being a creative partner to an outsider status. It was evident that there was a hierarchy of authority inside the band, based on how they handled their internal strife. Felder was referred to be a noisy ex-member, despite the fact that he made contributions to the Eagles, especially as Henley and Fry continued to run the Eagles as a brand. The dispute was resolved out of court in 2007 after years of conflict between the parties. No information was provided regarding the value of the settlement. However, the nature of the disagreement was not one that involved money. It was a prestigious honor. Felder was adamant that he did not wish to rejoin the band. He desired to be acknowledged as an essential component of their history rather than being omitted from the narrative that he had contributed to writing. Don Felder did not vanish once he parted ways with the Eagles and removed himself from the legal whirlwind. The year 2008 saw the publication of his memoir, Heaven and Hell. My Life of the Eagles, 1974 to 2001, which is a comprehensive account of his life as an insider. Not only did the book describe the past, but it also revealed the manipulation, injustice, and unhappiness that had existed within the band for decades. This caused the book to immediately become contentious. Felder's writing style is basic and uncomplicated. He does not attempt to conceal his resentment, nor does he attempt to soften his tone in order to shift blame. Each chapter sheds light on the manner in which Glenn Frey and Don Henley have amassed a disproportionate amount of authority within the Eagles, while the remaining members of the band have been steadily marginalized. These are no longer considered to be personal experiences. It is a collection of historical records that demonstrate how the inner workings of a band that is famous all over the world ran competitively. The book's influence was felt far beyond the people who read it. Almost immediately, it prompted a retaliatory response from the opposing side. Through the disclosure of confidential material, Felder was accused of violating the terms of his contract by Don Henley and his legal team. In response, the Eagles filed a lawsuit, requesting compensation for damages and obstructing the dissemination of specific sections of the electronic audio version of the memoir. Suddenly, the music was no longer a factor in the conflict. That was the question. Whose story was going to be told? In addition to serving as a tool for Felder to protest, the book also serves as a means for him to restore his position. He describes every aspect, from group meetings in which his voice was ignored to tours that gave him the impression that he was working for two different bosses rather than playing together as a band. Not only in his writing, but also in his day-to-day life, he frequently has the sensation of being excluded. Don Felder is not portrayed in Heaven and Hell in a superficial manner. He admits in the book that he had a short fuse, that he went overboard with his reactions, and that there were times when he was so fatigued that he wanted to give up. Therefore, as a result of that acknowledgement, the reader comes to the realization that the book is not only about pointing the finger at other people, but also about confronting himself. Felder is writing from a wound that has not yet healed, and he allows it to show. There was a split in opinion. Some of Felder's followers believed that he was merely trying to attract attention by digging up the past. On the other hand, the majority of people believed that the memoir was an essential insight into the inner workings of legendary bands, where reputation and talent are not always rewarded with justice. Since the publication of the book, Felder has continued to assert in interviews that he withheld information on some aspects of the book. "I didn't write it to destroy anybody," he explained to reporters. "If I wanted to, it would be a lot heavier. Felder's statement gives the impression that he was aware of the significance of his narrative and made the decision to refrain from pushing it to its limits. The fact that Felder has maintained his stance even after the publication of the book for more than a decade is quite extraordinary. He has emphasized in recent exchanges that Heaven and Hell is the truth from his own perspective, and that it is that truth without any embellishment, plain and simple. Not only does he not avoid taking responsibility for expressing his thoughts, but he also does not alter his viewpoint just for the sake of easing the discomfort of another individual. Heaven and Hell is more than just an artist's memoir from the point of view of its content-wise presentation. A legendary band that is run like a corporation, where art is required to submit to authority, is the subject of this history. Felder provides a detailed explanation of the cost of quitting and the purpose of his decision to stop enduring it any longer. After reading the book, the members' relationships became more tense than they had ever been before. The only thing that Henley did was acknowledge that he does not agree with what Felder wrote. Henley declined to comment in any detail. Both Joe Walsh and Timothy B. Schmidt maintained their neutrality, neither publicly endorsing nor conclusively refuting the allegations. Felder maintained his clarity. If he did not speak up, then nobody would be aware of the actual events that took place. Despite the fact that he was no longer a member of the Eagles, Don Felder did not make the decision to remain silent and in the background for the rest of his life. After the door was shut with the band, he did not go back to seek his old glory. Rather, he quietly marched forward, where he could tell his own tale in the language that had been with him throughout his entire life: music. The year 2012 marked the release of Felder's solo album, The Road to Forever, following his departure from the Eagles. In reality, it was not a high-profile attempt at a comeback. Rather, it was a validation that he was still capable of writing songs, playing guitar, and managing a musical production in the manner that he desired. The album was extremely personal, with lyrics that dealt with topics such as betrayal, change, grief, and the process of learning to go on. It was not merely a product of the studio. Rather, it was the conclusion of more than a decade's worth of music that had been stored up in the wake of psychological agony, the aftermath of a split that he had experienced by being silent. After that success, he published American Rock and Roll in 2019, which was a cross-generational record that featured rock giants such as Slash, Mick Fleetwood, Sammy Hagar, and Chad Smith. All of these artists contributed to the album. Felder shown not only that he was capable of functioning on his own, but also that he had garnered the respect of his contemporaries to the extent that he was able to put together a product of high quality. As a result of his independence from any authority structure, he became the focal point of his own musical compositions. Felder has been able to establish a consistent touring schedule since the year 2010. His performances in theaters, festivals, and classic rock shows across the country continue to draw a consistent audience, despite the fact that he is no longer performing on the enormous platforms that he did with the Eagles. In the course of those performances, Felder always includes Hotel California as an essential component of his repertoire. However, he also devotes a considerable amount of time to new material, which is a method of demonstrating that he is not bound to a certain period of time in the past. In particular, Felder's career saw still another significant transformation in 2025, when he released the album titled The Vault, 50 Years of Music. More than just a compilation of old recordings, this project is much more than that. This is a dig into musical memory, including a large number of demos that have not yet been released that have been meticulously recorded, edited, and mixed. There is a wide range of musical styles included on the CD, ranging from traditional rock to introspective ballads. As evidence that Felder is still appreciated by his peers and that they are prepared to collaborate with him on significant artistic endeavors, the CD has contributions from Steve Lukather, David Page, and Joseph Williams of Toto, among other notable artists. Felder has committed his time to education and community service, in addition to leading a successful career in the music industry. Workshops on the guitar have been taught by him. He has participated in panels on writing and performing, and he has encouraged free music education initiatives for young people. Not only does this enable him to maintain his connection to the younger generation, but it also substantiates the notion that music, in Felder's view, is not merely a method of making a living, but rather a vehicle for connecting. An incident involving Felder's health occurred in the middle of Tequila Sunrise in February 2025, while he was performing on the rock legend's cruise. He was removed off the stage and transported to the closest medical facility for treatment. According to the preliminary findings, the cause was discovered to be acute dehydration brought on by the severe weather conditions. Following a period of recuperation lasting several days, Felder took the initiative to send a letter to his fans, assuring them that he was in good health and would be returning to the stage as soon as possible. On the other hand, this occurrence served as a glaring reminder that, at the age of 77, his physical state is very different from what it was in the past, and that his appearance is becoming increasingly selective. There is something quite remarkable about the fact that Felder has never exploited his age as an excuse for a decrease in production, not in an effort to cling to the spotlight, but rather to demonstrate that his voice, both physically and symbolically, still carries weight. He continues to write, continue to record, and continue to put himself out there where it matters. After quitting the Eagles more than 20 years ago, he is no longer dependent on them in order to continue his career in music. As he continues to peel away the layers of memories, he survives thanks to his own survival and the decision he made not to quit. Don Felder does not appear to be furious about the events of the past anymore. However, the reason for his silence over the previous 20 years is not because he has forgotten them. Rather, it is because he is opting for a different strategy. Felder began to explain more about his inner self, his post-conflict perspective, and the reasons why he does not wish to restart an old battle in interviews that took place between the years 2024 and 2025. This was despite the fact that he still had sufficient information to do so. He famously exclaimed, "Being kicked out of the Eagles was a blessing," and he was right. It might appear to be a simple remark, but in reality, it was a process of unraveling one's own identity. Felder did not consider his departure from an atmosphere in which every action was regulated to be a complete loss. Rather, it was a means by which he was able to reclaim his value. During that period, he referred to it as the moment when he realized the distinction between obedience and cooperation. Following his dismissal, Felder made an effort to make amends with Glenn Frey, but he did not receive any reaction. He participated in the memorial service that was held in 2016, the year that Frey passed away, and he maintained a courteous tone in his words to the media. Felder stated once again in a recent interview, "I'm not happy that Glenn died, but I'm not pretending that we were on good terms. There was a gap between us that will never be filled." This is not a harsh remark. Rather, it is an honest acknowledgement of the fact that Glenn's passing occurred. With regard to Don Henley, their relationship remained tense and distant throughout the years. When they did occasionally cross paths at music events, the two showed only a small amount of civility to one another. After the passing of his closest partner, Glenn Frey, Felder never made a public attack on Henley. "There are things I still disagree with about the way Henley ran the band, but that's in the past," he stated to reporters. "It was not a retreat, but rather a declaration of boundaries when I made the statement, 'I choose to live in the present.'" Felder, in contrast to when he first published his memoir, does not repeat the specifics of his disputes in order to garner attention. When it comes to saying things to the media, he is very selective. Rather than concentrating on the drama, he concentrates on the experience of triumphing over traumatic events. "I don't forgive in order to make them feel better," he said to a central source. "It is not about the other person that forgiveness is about. Rather, it is about making a conscious choice to halt a repeated cycle of unpleasant emotions. I forgive so that I don't have to carry the burden anymore." Within the context of his seminars and workshops, Felder also discusses the psychological implications of residing in an environment that fosters creativity but does not adequately acknowledge the capabilities of individuals. He refers to it as a form of burnout that is not visible. When it comes to young musicians, Felder's guidance encompasses not only the knowledge of musical technique, but also the lessons of autonomy and how to keep one's personality intact when working in a group with a variety of personalities. Since the year 2020, Felder has been making more frequent appearances on music television shows, documentaries on rock history, and podcasts that are very in-depth. With regard to each, he has articulated his position. Not only does he not gloss over what took place, but he also does not use it as a weapon toward others. Although Felder does not shy away from discussing the instances in which he has been wronged, he also does not attempt to drown people in judgment while doing so. His remarks hold more weight since they come from someone who has experienced it, as opposed to someone who only wants to repeat it for the sake of fame. This approach makes his words more credible. Journalists have frequently attempted to dive into details that have not been communicated, but Felder maintains his distance. Although he is aware that his audience may be inquisitive, he is also aware that the first step toward earning respect is to take control of the story. "I don't want to turn my life into a long narrative," he replies in response. In other words, it is a confirmation that each and every time he speaks, he does it with a certain intention, which could be to clarify or to conclude. The fact that Felder chose to forgive does not make the events that transpired any less significant. The fact that he was once expelled from what he had worked so hard to achieve is unaffected by this. However, this does demonstrate that there is something more powerful than restoring his status, and that is his ability to reclaim calm within his own mind. And from that point on, he continues to work, continues to act, and continues to live without expecting anyone else to rewrite history for him. If there is one thing that Don Felder consistently brings up when he is discussing his career, it is the guitar solo that he played on the album Hotel California. It is not because he is attempting to cling to an antique legacy. Rather, it is because he is aware of it. It was that song that contributed to the Eagles becoming icons all over the world. He accomplished it in his own room with a 12-string guitar, without the assistance of a producer or a sophisticated studio. It was simply pure emotion and technical virtuosity as he played. It is not true that Felder was the lyrics writer for Hotel California. However, the instrumental demo that he submitted to Glenn Frey and Don Henley, which contained a melody, ended up becoming the foundation for a song that would come to define an entire era. When he thinks back on that particular moment, he does not use the word proud in a casual manner. Simply put, he asserts that he did the very best he could at the time. Finally, it is robust enough to withstand the passage of time, which is a great blessing. Throughout his later solo concerts, Hotel California was presented as the show's concluding number. Felder carried out the performance in the same manner. Due to the fact that the crowd had come to hear what they remembered, each and every note was performed virtually exactly as it could have been in the original. Surprisingly, he never made any attempt to alter the solo in order to make it seem different. As a gesture of respect for the work and for the person who was listening to it, he contemplated maintaining the framework in its current form. Furthermore, the audience is not the only source of acknowledgement that he receives. Even though Felder's history is fraught with disagreements, a great number of well-known musicians continue to collaborate with him. From the perspective of his co-workers, who look beyond the drama to the skill, this is how it appears. The fact that Slash, Joe Satriani, and Steve Lukather have chosen to collaborate with him on recent albums speaks for itself. They do not defend him in the press, but they have chosen to record with him themselves. It was not Felder's intention to reconcile with the past when he entered the studio. He went in with the intention of carrying on with the activities that he insisted he was destined to do: compose music, play the guitar, and produce something that would outlive him. Not a nostalgic album, The Vault, 50 Years of Music, is not a collection of songs. It is a declaration that he is not bound by Hotel California, that he is not constrained by the Eagles, and that he does not require the validation of anyone else for what he has accomplished. Felder does not seem to discuss his previous band very much in the workshops and lectures that he has attended. On the other hand, he emphasizes the need of consistency and the importance of practicing one's art for a sufficient amount of time so that when the occasion presents itself, one may perform something truly remarkable. Young pupils look up to him as a role model, not because he is famous, but because he demonstrates how to endure rejection without losing one's identity. His career is not discussed in the mainstream media nearly as frequently as the careers of the other members of the Eagles, but this does not in any way diminish the value of the item. Felder has a reputation for being a low-key persona among musicians. When it comes to his appearance, he does not dominate the stage. With his sound, he takes it in stride. Felder does not beg for credit or to be invited back to the Eagles Club when it comes to his place in Eagles history. He also does not ask to be invited back. "I'm not waiting for an apology," he stated in an interview that took place in the year 2025. "I did what I had to do. If it's not in the official record, it's in the music." We are not making a defensive statement here. The mindset of someone who is aware that time will reveal what is genuine and what is only a fleeting fad is characteristic of this individual. Don Felder, who is 77 years old, does not have a label agreement, a private plane, or a tour that lasts for 3 months. Despite this, he continues to appear on stage with a guitar in his hand, and the audience continues to remain silent whenever he performs. He has not rejoined the Eagles anymore. On the other hand, he does not have to be, because the music that he left behind in that band will continue to be played night after night by millions of people, regardless of whether or not he consciously forgot it. Please feel free to leave a comment if you discover that the things you've read or heard have caused you to view music from a different angle. Your opinions are very much appreciated by us. For example, if you think that this content is valuable, you should share it with others so that they can have a better understanding of a period in rock history that is rarely described in its full. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any additional stories that are similar to this one. Your presence is much appreciated until the very end.